would you feel about a law that requires people over the age of 70 to pass a specialized driving test in order to continue driving? Sorry if this ends up being long, but it's angered me for quite some time. About 10 years ago, my mother at age 69 had a massive stroke. They didn't expect her to live, let alone come out of it mostly alright. Which she did, except for some vision loss in her left eye. Not total, just peripheral. So she can only see perfectly straight out of that eye. So after about a year recovering from the stroke and the ensuing infection from the surgery that ended up being worse than the stroke itself, she decides she wants to go get tested to see if she can retain her driver's license, required by law in my province of Canada. My father was not well either, as he had a long-term terminal illness, so I pack them both up in my truck and take them to the DMV. Me and my father happily assuming there is no fucking way in hell she will pass. Aside from her vision issues, the amazingly quick-witted and swift woman I grew up with was very unsure of herself at all times, and took forever to make the smallest decisions. It broke my heart, and it didn't even occur to me to be scared that she would get her license back. Well, she did. Passed with flying colors, the DMV guy said. As a SAR, search and rescue tech, the idea of taking him up in the helicopter and throwing him out without a rope occurred to me. 1 week later, accident number 1. T-boned a poor lady as she was coming out of the grocery store. Not much damage and no injuries, thankfully. Mother still refused to admit she wasn't fit to drive. Month later, accident 2. She panics on a multi-lane cross-city road and ends up on the raised median and rips the entire exhaust system off her car. Still won't admit any issues. At this point I'm amazed I didn't have ulcers. Shortly after accident 2, my father passed away. I did everything up to and including begging to get her to give up the license. She wouldn't do it, and for the next few months I spent every day with a knot in my stomach until I spoke to her around 6 p.m. every night once she was home from running around. Then around 1 p.m. I get a call from her cell phone. This phone I bought her that she mostly ignored except to charge it. I couldn't understand a word she said. She was so upset on the phone. I managed to get her general location out of her and hopped in a car and more than exceeded the speed limit getting down there. Upon arriving there are 2 ambulances. Shoes in front of her car and it's up on the curb. She's sitting on the curb next to it, bawling her eyes out, and I'm terrified she's killed someone. Turns out a man and his son were walking out of the soccer pitch next to the road. Began to cross on the crosswalk and she didn't see them. She thankfully only struck the father, and aside from being banged up, he wasn't super seriously injured. Because of my job I knew most of the police officers in the city, so one of them offered to follow me back to her house so she could take me back down to get her car. By the time I had done so and got back to her condo, she had stopped crying, threw me the extra set of keys to the car she had, and told me to get rid of the car. She even tried to get the DMV worker that passed her fired after that. She immediately realized she shouldn't have ever gotten it back. She was actually terrified that she had been driving like that. Years later she still comments about how she never even saw the man and his son, and how she could have killed one or both of them. I have all the respect in the world for seniors. My mother was one of the first women CEOs in this province and was a hellcat in her day. I learned a lot from her. But I also learned to accept limitations. If you're older reading this post, if you think for even a second that you could maybe not be the safest person to be on the road, talk to and listen to your loved ones. It's horrible to give up that freedom. It would be more horrible for you to kill some innocent person because you're too proud to give it. Up. Asterisk edit asterisk thanks for the gold mysterious stranger. Here in Illinois my grandpa had to do it every year after 75. That's a great idea. I'm going to call my 68-year-old congressman and ask him to support such legislation. Old A retired guy here. 74 years old to be precise. I would accept such a test provided it was only to catch really age-related diseases, dementia, poor reflexes, etc. I live in a retirement community and most of the people who should not have a license have already given them up. The first day I was here I heard a conversation between two guys. Guy 1, I just turned 88 and turned in my driver's license. Guy 2, why would you do that? Guy 1, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm all for retesting people. However, I'm not sure what you mean by specialized. The requirements for good driving don't change with age, so it should be the same test. Ideally, we'd all be retested every 10 years or so until we hit 60. Then we're retested every 5 years. However, older folks are a huge voting bloc and it's unlikely this would ever pass. I send patients for driver's evaluations if their ability to navigate through my office is concerningly questionable. Unaware drivers are just as dangerous as impaired drivers. Asterisk let me say this about that. Asterisk a neighbor I love is 93 and still driving. When she's up to it, she can barely see the on-off switch on her vacuum cleaner. Should she be driving? I want her to maintain independence. But at the same time, I don't think it's safe for her or others. Yet the DMV doesn't require her to take a vision exam or a competency test. Ugh, please. My grandma is practically blind and went to take her driving vision test to renew her license. She failed. But the lady at the DMV felt bad, so she had her take it again and gave her hints so she could pass it. So now my practically blind grandma is out on the road still. It's for their safety as much as anyone else's. I'm so mad that the lady at the DMV was so irresponsible as to let her keep driving. All for it. When I was 14 my friend was coming to my house and he got killed by my next-door neighbor who happened to be elderly. My friend was on his skateboard and he was just up the street from my house. From the position of his body and where elderly guy stopped his car I could see he made a super sharp left turn that killed him and ran over my other friend. The other friend survived and recovered from his injuries. But my other friend, not so lucky. Oh, and my granddad has Alzheimer's and frequently forgets where he is. And I think he still has his license. Though my grandma finally took his keys. I'm an IDOC and I'd be all for it. You know how often I get berated or threatened by geriatrics when I strongly suggest that they quit driving because they no longer meet the legal requirements for driving. People should have to retake the driver's test every 10 years if not 20. I've seen too many terrible drivers of all ages. Can we make everyone take it? Seriously. I see more horrible drivers in the commuting age bracket than in the retired age bracket. My grandma rear-ended a line of stocked cars on the highway at full speed. No brakes. With my 5-year-old brother in the car because she thought she saw a deer on the side of the road. She's been in another, less serious wreck, and has come to a dead stop while on the highway because she forgot where she was going multiple times since then. My dad had to unplug her battery and tell her that her car doesn't work anymore so she would start asking for rides. I would love if they took age into account in some way. I'm not an expert on anything so I don't know how they would do it. So that families wouldn't have to be torn between treating their elders like a child or worrying if they're going to get a call from the hospital anytime they're behind the wheel. My fiancé's brother was killed riding his motorcycle Sunday by a 91-year-old who pulled out in front of him. He left behind a wife and 3 children. He was one of the best guys I ever met. We are all devastated, and it could have been prevented. That man had no business behind the wheel. I'd be okay with it if over 70 drivers are statistically more likely to get into accidents. I live in a town that caters to older people, and watching him drive is painful. By them, I mean end of middle age and up. From going 30 km/h in a 70 km/h zone, to watching him stare out the side window while going through that same zone. They swerve from side to side. I refuse to go anywhere with my grandpa driving, as he is now a horrible driver and has nearly crashed the car multiple times, then blames it on other drivers. However, I won't say that only elderly people need to be tested. I would hate having to do so, but we all should be tested. Just last night, teenagers drove over a school's fence in a large truck. People saw them. Cops haven't caught them. Younger people speed more, usually 70 in a 50. In just today, I got stuck behind someone doing 20 km/h in a 50 zone. And then while I was going 60 km/h, someone flew past me like I was standing still. The roads would be better if we were all retested. And in regards to my town, if cops would actually do their job, going severely under the speed limit is dangerous just as speeding is. We need statistics to show us which demographics cause the most accidents over distance driven. If the over 70 leads in this, then yes. As an insurance professional, just because you have been doing something for a long time, does not mean you are good at it. Drivers should be tested every 5 years. Not just once you hit a certain age. Everyone should take a standardized road test every 5 years. I'm for it. The inability for old people to drive would result in voting en masse for public transportation improvements. By the time the law was passed, self-driving cars will be available. Or how about you just have to do a refresher course every 10 years? There are a lot of people out there with fully functional senses that still need a reminder about the rules of the road. I'd be all for it if we can compensate him by providing transportation to those who can no longer drive for low-cost self-driving cars may soon fit this position. They should make everyone take driver's ed classes every 10 years. It's ridiculous to think someone who passed driver's ed even 20 years ago knows all the new traffic laws and car technology. Ontario has testing every 2 years for 80 plus. 70 is a bit young for that, honestly. This has been tried, but the organizations like AARP are very powerful and shoot down this type of legislation. It's hard enough to book a driving test these days. It takes a good 4 months in the UK. This would worsen the situation. Based on the state of driving I see every day, everyone should have to pass a driver's test every 5 years. It won't happen. I'm assuming you're talking about the US. The DMV is a state-level agency, not federal. So if one state were to have that law, another state may not have it. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe for more content.